Tonight, after two crashes, 40 airlines around the world are saying they would no longer fly the newest version of the Boeing 237. Did I get that right? No, 737. Sorry about that. The Boeing 737. Every country in Europe refused to either fly the plane or even allow some of the planes to fly over their territory, believe it or not. The U.S. finally did ground the Boeing jet.
We're going to be issuing an emergency order of prohibition to ground all flights of the 737 MAX 8 and the 737 MAX 9 and planes associated with that line.
What really moved the story yesterday, by the way, was when it was revealed that the pilot of the Ethiopian plane that crashed had flight control issues. It was described as the nose of the jet wanting to go down, right? Wanting to go down right after takeoff. And there's this, a newly discovered, by those of us in the media anyway, type of database that allows pilots to talk to each other about issues related to planes and airports that shows that U.S. pilots have for quite a while now been complaining about this Boeing 737 MAX 8. Rachel Blevins has been following this story. She joins us now to take us through it. First of all, what is this database where we're getting this information from the pilots?
Right, so this is a federal database where airline pilots can go and submit anonymous complaints about experiences that they have when they're flying. And we're talking about this now because the Boeing 737 MAX 8 is in the news, and it turns out that there are a number of airline pilots who have actually submitted complaints about this plane recently that are here in the United States.
And they match pretty much what we've been told about the nose of the plane that may have caused the crashes?
Exactly. So their stories are really eerie because they actually line up with some of the stories that we've seen these deadly crashes from. So let's take a look at a few of the comments that we've seen on this database. So on one of them, a pilot wrote, quote, "I looked at an engaged A autopilot as I was returning to my primary flight display. Pilot monitoring called descending, followed by an almost immediate don't sink, don't sink. I immediately disconnected autopilot and resumed climb." So what he's saying is that they took off, everything was fine, and then they put the plane on autopilot, and all of a sudden the nose just starts diving. And luckily they
He didn't want to go down, but the plane was doing it on its own.
Exactly, and it was on autopilot, so it was supposed to have been flying with no problems at all. And luckily, manually, they were able to fix that. But what's really scary is that there's another pilot who has the exact same story. So another pilot wrote in this database, and he said, quote, "The aircraft accelerated normally and the captain engaged the A autopilot after reaching set speed. Within 2 to 3 seconds, the aircraft pitched nose down. I called descending just prior to the ground proximity warning system, sounding don't sink again. The captain immediately disconnected the autopilot and pitched into a climb." So we have another similar story. But then there's another account on this database that really calls out the airlines that use these planes and the FAA. And he's saying that the pilots who are flying these planes aren't prepared. And he said, quote, "I think it is unconscionable that a manufacturer, the FAA, and the airlines would have pilots flying an airplane without adequately training or ever providing available resources and sufficient documentation to understand the highly complex systems that differentiate this aircraft from prior models. The flight manual is inadequate and almost criminally insufficient."
Wow. And he wrote that. Now, these are anonymous pilots talking on this database, which now we were able to get access to, and it really does make a difference. Rachel, thank you for that report. Let's do this. Let's go over to John Jordan. John Jordan, why John Jordan? Well, he's an FAA certified flight instructor. He's logged more than 10,000 hours of flying. He's also one of my favorite guests and a heck of a great guy who joins us now to take us through this. All right. What do you make of the description that the nose on the plane would go down as soon as they put the plane on autopilot? Or I guess if it took off on autopilot, it was already on there. What does that mean to you?
Well, most jets, including the Gulfstreams that I fly, have a system where if it detects a stall or an excessively high angle of attack, it's called the stick pusher in a Gulfstream, and it will push the nose over. It will overpower the pilot, whether the autopilot's engaged or not. Now, I was flying my parents with my dad, who's watching this broadcast right now, and I actually had an almost identical thing happen with the Gulfstream. So the AOA indicator sensed a stall, and the stick pusher engaged, and so I was able to disconnect it, and it's caused quite a scare. In this case, which is similar, the procedure is to pull a circuit breaker if you have what's called a pitch trim runaway. And you have to be really, really on that and really on top of your game. And Gulfstream School, they teach this over and over, so you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
The MCAS system on the Boeing 737 is similar, but apparently it's sufficiently different that it required some training that wasn't there.
Yeah, and everything that you're saying adds up, right? Because it seems to me, from listening to Rachel's report, that some of the pilots in the United States saw the kind of scary situation they were going through, were able to react, turn off the autopilot, and as a result, pull the plane back up. But who knows what happened to the Indonesian pilot? Who knows what the weather conditions were like? Who knows if he was experienced wind shear? Who knows if he just didn't have the adequate training or just didn't have the fortitude to be able to react to it, right?
This is a combination, Rick. I can always tell you, this is a combination of pilot training and a newfangled mechanical system, the NCAS and the Boeing 737 MAX 8, that's unique to that model of Boeing 737. In this case, in the Ethiopia crash, most people don't know this, but the captain was 29 years old, and the first officer only had 200 hours of flight time. For instance, I've logged 200 hours of flight time in the last 8 months. So you had a combination of inexperienced crew, a sophisticated airplane, and probably inadequate training. And the combination of these two things was just too much. But this airplane should have been grounded, and I imagine we're going to get into that, but it should have been grounded sooner.
No. I was just going to say, it sounds like President Trump did the right thing, albeit maybe a little bit late, considering we were last to do so in this case. But I think, and we're also hearing, John, and maybe you can confirm this, we're down to like 20 seconds. Boeing is saying it's going to take them at least a couple of months to make this right. Do you have any reason to believe they can't do it?
No, they'll ultimately do it, but it's going to take a while. They're going to have to pull apart the black box data from Ethiopia and identify a software fix, but it's going to be complicated because this is a newfangled type of complicated system.
That's so weird. They're brand new planes having a malfunction. John Jordan, man, great guest. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon. I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.